Hi, everybody. This is Scott Park Phillips, and I wrote two books about martial arts, and I thought I should do a series of videos where I talk about them, something like that. My first book, Possible Origins, big hit, A Cultural History of Chinese Martial Arts Theater and Religion from 2016. And this book came out this year, Tai Chi, Bagua and the Golden Elixir, Internal Martial Arts Before the Boxer Uprising. And I've also published lots of articles. Also this year, I published in the Journal of Taoist Studies on the origins of Tai Chi and its relationship to Johnson Feng, which is, Johnson Feng is an immortal, and the nationalist propaganda, which became the communist propaganda, eventually tried to create this scenario where Johnson Feng was a person and didn't really exist and therefore didn't create Tai Chi. Sort of like saying Santa Claus didn't create Christmas or something because he wasn't a real person. It's like it's like it's not a real argument. It has nothing to do with the fact that Santa Claus and Christmas go together. That's which is the real point about the origins of Tai Chi. What is the story that goes with the art? And a fundamental here's a sort of philosophical point that I seem to crash into a lot of people over, and that's the idea that martial arts is an aesthetic tradition. It's a movement art. All the Chinese martial arts are physical movement traditions, say like African dance, that portray an aesthetic, and then they integrate martial skills into that aesthetic. Now, the aesthetic is already martial to begin with, so it's not like it's a hard task or something. But the point is that it's an aesthetic, and that's why martial arts are cohesive. Even though, a single martial art like Bagua or Xingyi or Wing Chun are are a cohesive aesthetic on their own. They look different, even though they may have completely overlapping techniques. That's it's a pretty key idea that there is an aesthetic basis for the martial arts. And that's really what got me writing, is that it was quite obvious to me that people were making this kind of error, saying that there was a pure martial art that developed intrinsically from some kind of fighting, and then like became these long forms with this whole aesthetic attached to them. And I was like, there's no way. First of all, this never happened anywhere on Earth. It's always the other way around. You have the martial skills and you have the aesthetic, and you insert the martial skills into the aesthetic. You don't take the martial skills and then put an aesthetic on top of them. That would make no sense. If you were trying to keep it martial, you would never do that. But on the other hand, if you have a physical aesthetic that you're performing and you're practicing, you clearly can put martial skills into them. And there's lots of really great reasons for doing that. Mostly that you love your children, that you love fighting, or you need to defend yourself all the time because you live in a really dangerous world. All sorts of things like that. And all that, the first book, when I wrote the first book, my experience as a dancer, studying North Indian classical dance, Kathak, and Congolese dance, the Laori people, and lots of other dances. I mean, I studied Catherine Dunham's stuff, so Brazilian dance and Haitian dance and really really long list of dances. Lots of European folk dances too, and Aboriginal dances from Australia. I mean, all over the place. And I just found, like, if you can fight, you can usually fight with dance, because the people who created those dances could fight, and they put those skills in there. And the dances are an aesthetic first, right? And the question is, were martial arts an aesthetic first or a fighting skill first? And that's not really an important question because they were both. They were integrated. And that's the whole point of this book, is that the religion completely integrated martial arts. Totally. Martial arts were part of the religion. Just like holy water is part of Christianity. I mean, it was the religion, not separable from the religion. And martial arts were also part of the theater, and the theater was also part of the religion. And it's hard to say which one was bigger. Which was bigger? Martial arts, something people did with their bodies. Theater, something people did with their imagination. Or religion, something people did to integrate the two, right? Your physical ritual body with the imagination. For, that is the gods, right? However you want to say, you can say the gods are real or not. It's not really an important question. If the gods are salient to your life, to your lifestyle, and how you organize government, how you organize family, how you organize a militia, how you share water resources. If the gods are salient to that, it doesn't really matter if they're real. Their imaginary qualities are integrated with, they're embodied in the rituals you do. And that's really what the first book was about. It was the general case. And people said, "But Scott, can you prove it?" So I proved it for Tai Chi in the Taoist Journal of Taoist Studies. But I really wanted to write something for the lay practitioner that was in great depth. So I wrote both about Bagua and Tai Chi, and then I also show. I talk about what the golden elixir is and how it relates to martial arts, because that hadn't been done in any serious way by anyone before. It's hinted at actually by a lot of people, but not nobody seriously took on the question: how are these things precisely related? But I should really start just talking about the beginning of the book. My first chapter is called, you can't really see this, can you? We Begin in Darkness. And most people know that the communists, particularly under Mao Zedong, murdered more people than any other regime in history that we certainly anything documented. The Mongols killed a lot of people too, but yeah, the Mao, the numbers get really high if you're really trying to do a serious estimate, and the tens of millions, 50 million, 100 million, even, and. But the thing about that is that if you're going to talk about martial arts, you got to talk about the 50 years before, 50 years after the Boxer Rebellion, to when the communists took over, because that was the main period when martial arts were changed. In other words, where the successful attempt in many ways to separate martial arts, theater, and religion took place. So. And there was a lot of different governments, a lot that are warring factions. There's World War II, there's World War One. All this stuff happens, and it's like how do I summarize that subject? And the key thing to understand is that while the nationalists, if you want to call them that, the era of the Republic, did not kill as many people. They were extremely repressive, and they did attack religion in all sorts of ways. And I call this the YMCA Consensus, because the people who came up through the YMCA schools and Chinese Christians were converted largely by American Christians, and Methodists were one of the most successful groups. and they went to China, and starting in the 1880s, really, in large numbers, significant numbers of single women, in fact, went, and they set out to, end opium use, liberate women, share ideas, science, commerce, and eventually they got onto the idea of spreading democracy too, and improving sanitation. They had a list, but those were the big ones, and they, to do this, they started schools and hospitals everywhere, and the Chinese people loved schools and hospitals, frankly. And quickly, lots of Chinese converted to Christianity. And even the ones that didn't convert to Christianity still took on those same value systems. So the idea of women's liberation and the free spreading of commerce and ideas and science and they wanted all that, and that's what I call the YMCA consensus, because it was the YMCA. YMCA is just one of these Methodist and groups, but we know about them because today we still talk about them, because at least in the United States we have YMCA's where people do athletic stuff, and they were the quintessential representative of something called muscular Christianity, which eventually became sort of a type of nationalism, which is worldwide. Many different countries had some version of muscular Christianity in the form of nationalism. It's really got the 1938 Olympics is like full of these sorts of things, and it came out in the form of folk dance or the spread of yoga or those are the big ones, and the Chinese version of it was to spread martial arts as a pure art, as a way of spreading these particular values of these. So scholars call this the Christian secular normative model, but that's so cumbersome, and I just call it the YMCA consensus. It's something that was widely agreed on. Now, not everyone in China agreed on it, but it doesn't really matter. All the people in power agreed, pretty much. And in this period, 500,000 temples were destroyed. It's astronomic. It's an astronomic change, and the religion itself was under attack. And this is now being documented. There's a little bit to document what happened to theater. Certainly, a lot of changes happened to theater as well. I mean, profound, as happened to religion. It was as profound a change, and the same thing for martial arts. If you just think about what would it mean to martial arts or theater to have 500,000 temples destroyed, if in a sense, the martial arts body was the temple, and the separation of martial arts, theater, and religion is the key filter by which people understand the past and understand the arts themselves. That people are seeing martial arts as a pure thing. But once you start to realize that it used to be integrated, you can see that all the elements of theater and religion are still there. They didn't go away. They've got smushed a little bit in the transition. So one of the things that I think is confusing, that I try to lay out in the book right in the beginning. And there are many ways I could have done this. I tried to come up with a simple way to do it, so people would get it, and that's the Chinese concept of religion. A religion that has theater and martial arts in it is profoundly different than the category religion that we use in the West. So the category religion in the West is primarily centered around a set of beliefs that then becomes a communal piety. We all share these beliefs, and and you're willing to die. It's tragic in the sense that you're willing to die for your beliefs, and that's the you no matter what's happening, you don't change that set of beliefs. They're your faith, right? And the Chinese religion is just not organized that way. What I argue is that there are four components of Chinese religion: the state, ritual theater, texts, and the body. So religion was a function of state. The first Christians, in fact, the first Chinese Christians in the 1850s were the Taiping Rebellion. Set up immediately started trying to create a state, because they just didn't have any concept of religion that wasn't about the state, wasn't about an institution which would hold the country together. And then ritual theater. This is a much more complicated idea, but the sacred texts of China were theater manuals. Not the only sacred texts, but the most popular and widespread sacred texts were plays, were these long plays, and the idea of ritual as an organizing principle for society was absolutely pervasive, and theater was where you learned morality. Texts, so Christianity, Judaism, you can write texts and they can become important, but the sacred text is set, for the most part, is set. And in the Chinese tradition, you just need a medium, and you can write a new sacred text. And so there's thousands and thousands, tens, maybe 15,000 sacred texts. It's a lot, depending on where do you draw the lines, and what is sacred and what is a religion, and all sorts of things like that. But certainly the Taoist canon has thousands of texts. And that's just the key idea, that the text itself is a sacred thing, and it's available. You can create it, and that's important because the texts are part of the ritual, and the ritual is part of martial arts. You're telling stories in a sense, and they're very closely related in terms of, say, transmedium practices. So you do a ritual with a group of people, and you become possessed. If you're possessed by a martial god, you teach martial arts. If you're possessed by a literary god, you write something. You write a sacred text. They're that close. In a sense, martial arts are the text of the martial gods. It's that direct. And then the fourth element of Chinese religion is the body. The body is the smallest unit of ritual, and the body is. Let's see, what did I write here? Yeah, so martial arts was a way of sharing a ritual body with other people. It's a your conduct as a person is the way you move, right? Your physicality, and the way you move in a ritual world affects the future and the past. So the precision of your conduct starts to really matter in that worldview. So so if you have a problem with your body, it has to do with your ancestors, your sort of lineage that passed through your body. And the same thing, if you're going to heal something, it has to do with how your conduct, you know, changes your body and therefore changes the future or changes the past. So this is, I'm doing some translating here and some abbreviating. And the book, I get really detailed about it. But that overview that the body is really central idea is very different than the Christian view. You can't have Chinese religion without a body. And the other thing I wanted to say about the pious communities. In the Chinese tradition, if the gods weren't doing what you wanted, or if the temple you're going to, a temple or shrine that you are making offerings at, isn't working, you just go to another one. You just change, and they have different precepts and different values and different. They have different beliefs, because belief isn't the central element. It's flexible. It's comic in that sense that it's like it just change a lot. You just go, oh no, Buddhism, forget it. Let's go to Taoism, or that's not working. Let's just find some trickster god and Monkey King or whatever, and work with him because my wife's not getting pregnant. Whatever you need some trick. The structure of the religion is totally different. Seems like a good introduction. I guess in terms of an overview, the other things that I really go into in depth in this book, what is Tai Chi and what is Bagua it came from asking specific questions. So I asked the question, so if, as seems obvious from someone studying the history and culture of China, that is the connection between religion, theater, and martial arts, if that's true, that they're connected, then I should ask, well, can't we find some evidence of Tai Chi in theater? Right? And so since I heard this Johnson Fung story, I just said, well, let's look and see if Johnson Fung is in theater. Because the only scholarship we had in English basically said he was ubiquitous. It tells us almost nothing about him. Like he's everywhere in the end of the Ming Dynasty and beginning of the Qing Dynasty. He's like really common, but there's no one's done research on his cult in any significant way, other than sort of political polemics. I mean, there is some research, especially on sort of its relationship to Taoism proper, but not the popular deity or whatever you want to call him, immortal. So I just started diving in, and the main thing you learn about Johnson Fung right away is that he's the master of the golden elixir. That's what he does, and I got in, and I was like, well, is there a play, that has Johnson Fung in it? And I found one, and then I'm looking at this play called Xiyangji. It's like a journey to the west in a boat. It's about the play about the historic character Zheng He, who travels to Africa and Mecca and Southeast Asia. And Johnson Fung shows up, and it's like he gets in a fight with all these palace guards, and the names of the movements are Tai Chi movements. I mean, it's not a perfect lineup, but they're there, and it's like, and he's like asleep or drunk. He's fake drunk. He smells like vomit and alcohol, but that's one of his special powers. He can make that smell happen. So you don't really know if he's drunk or not in the story. Um, you don't even know if he's asleep. He might be faking being asleep, and that's what the guards think. So that's why they try to beat him up. But you know, and all these Tai Chi moves, like golden cock stands on one leg, and are in there, and it turns out that they're actually more closely related to this general named Qi Ji Guan, who died about, I don't know, 5 years before the play is published. So he's probably alive, still alive, and when the play was written. And in fact, this part of the play could be older than Qi Ji Guan. We just don't know. No one's really done that research. It could be done. But the names are the same as Qi Ji Guan mentions in his open hand fighting this famous general. And so then I was like, oh man, this is too good. So is there a connection, right? So I'm like, well, obviously Qi Ji Guan was like most likely to be a religious man. Let's look at it. And it turns out, like, not only is he a religious man, but he's like that he was closely connected to really famous. He was the most famous student of Lin Jiaoan, who was someone who combined Taoism, Buddhism, and Confucianism in his teachings, and who claimed to have studied directly with Johnson Feng, who came to him regularly at night to teach him. And so, here's Qi Ji Guan is like basically studying with a student of Johnson Feng. Yeah, I mean it's mythos, but it's religion, right? It's straight religion in the Chinese tradition. And so that was like, whoa, that's big. That actually just wipes out the scholarship up until now. So that was pretty exciting. I'll talk more about that in a future video. The Bagua thing, I was reading a lot of stuff. I was really, because I'd studied Indian classical dance, and there were so many parallels between Bagua and Indian dance, and I was like, what is the connection? Is there one? Am I imagining it? Right? Big question. You have to, when you're a really open-minded person like me, you have to wonder, are you making connections that aren't there? Because, hey, it's possible. But I didn't know what the connection was, right? I just seemed there was a connection. And then I just started reading about the God Nojaw. And there were two really important books, one by Meir Shahar on Nojaw and the other by Mark Muhlenfeld on on Nojaw's epic, which is called Feng Shan Yan Yi. And once I got deep into it, I came up with 27. There's probably a lot more. 27 like direct correlations between what the aesthetic of Bagua and Nojaw. And this is like to just make my argument really simple. A person before 1900 would have seen the God Nojaw as Bagua. It would just looked at that movement and said, "Oh, that has to be Nojaw. That person is doing the Nojaw aesthetic." And Nojaw is like it's not a small god. He's like one of the biggest gods in Chinese culture, one of the most important, and also strange in the sense that he's both the city of Beijing is built on Nojaw's body, so it's like a map of his body. So he's like the capital was called Nojia City, and so like everybody knew it's not like an obscure god. And then also like Nojaw actually means rebellion. It's like a he was anti-Confucian in the sense that he commits suicide by cutting off his flesh and giving it to his mother and gives his bones to his father. It's like the worst thing you can do in Confucianism. And so he's a trickster, transgressive god. And that was the definition of the type of god that had to be gotten rid of after the Boxer Uprising. And so it's like a perfect storm. I was like, oh, after the Boxer Uprising, Bhagwat, and there's all these Bhagwat. It's like no other martial art where like the Bhagwat people are all like, yeah, our lineage is involved in the Boxer Uprising. There's no other martial art like that. Uh, and and of course, Nojaw, I did some research, and like people possessed by Nojaw and other gods from Fengshen Yani were the vanguard in the Boxer Uprising. They were possessed by these gods of the theater and believed they were bulletproof and that whole thing. So it just like, anyway, I was so excited about this material. I had to write a book, but I also had to write a book. So I found something to get excited about. Anyway, I think you'll love this book if you haven't read it. And I'm happy to talk about it in the comments, and meet me on Patreon. And that's Scott Park Phillips. That kind of thing. Yeah. Anyway, there's the book. Da-da-da-da. There's Nojaw. There's some Johnson Fung pictures. Can you see him? Whoa, there he is chilling. Lots of pictures. Anyway, thanks for listening.